I can pinpoint the exact moment everything began to crumble. It was a chilly Tuesday evening in March, and I just trudged home after another grueling 12-hour shift at the hospital. My mind was on autopilot as I sorted through the stack of mail, expecting nothing but bills and junk. Then I saw it, an unfamiliar credit card statement. At first I thought it was a mistake, but as I skimmed through the pages, my stomach sank. $50,000 in charges to high-end boutiques and luxury stores I'd never even heard of. My name was printed boldly across the top, and below it my social security number. My hands trembled as I stared at the paper, disbelief coursing through me. Identity theft, I thought. That's all it could be. But I had no idea that this wasn't just about stolen money. This was the thread that would unravel a web of deceit stretching far deeper than I could have imagined, dragging my family down with it. To understand how I ended up here, you need to know where it all started. My name is Rachel Chin, and I've always been the other sister. Jessica, my older sister, was the golden child, the star who could do no wrong. While I spent weekends buried in textbooks, trying to keep my nursing school scholarship, Jessica breezed through life with an effortless charm and our parents' unshakable support. Designer clothes, posh apartments, and weekends in Paris. That was Jessica's world. My world? Part-time jobs, ramen dinners, and mounting student loans. Why can't you be more like Jessica? Mom would say with a sigh whenever I mentioned struggling with tuition. She's polished. She knows how to get ahead in life. Jessica's success culminated when she married Richard Thompson, the heir to a real estate empire. Their wedding was a spectacle, a $500,000 extravaganza splashed across the society pages. I stood at the edge of it all, wearing a bridesmaid dress I couldn't afford, eating food I couldn't pronounce, and thinking about the double shift waiting for me the next day. Dad's toast still rings in my ears. To Jessica, who's always known what she wants and never settles for less. You make us proud every day. I stayed silent, picking at my overpriced plate, knowing no one would notice if I disappeared. That was 7 years ago, before Jessica's perfect world collapsed. The phone call came late one night as I was finishing a shift in the ER. Her voice was unrecognizable, broken, and desperate. "Rachel, I need you," she sobbed. "Richard's leaving me. He's frozen all our accounts. I have nothing." I stood in the fluorescent-lit hallway, still wearing scrubs streaked with blood from a trauma case, listening to my sister plead. This was the same Jessica who had ignored my calls, missed my graduation, and never set foot in my modest 2-bedroom home. "Please," she whispered. "I know we drifted apart, but you're my sister." Against my better judgment, I let her in. At midnight, Jessica showed up on my doorstep with mascara streaks down her face, clutching a Louis Vuitton suitcase like it was a lifeline. "It's just temporary," she said, hugging me tightly. "I just need a few weeks to get back on my feet." I wanted to believe her, so I cleared out my tiny home office, bought an air mattress, and tried to make her feel welcome. For a while, it was almost nice. Jessica, stripped of her glittering facade, seemed humbled. She cooked dinner, awkwardly, but she tried. She helped with chores, and we stayed up late talking like we hadn't in years. She told me about Richard's affairs, the ironclad prenup, and how our parents had disowned her the moment she stopped being their trophy daughter. "You're the only person who's ever really cared about me, Rachel," she said one night, tears brimming in her eyes. I wanted so badly to believe her. For a few fleeting weeks, it felt like we were finally reconnecting. But then, little things started happening. My mail began to disappear. A bill here, a statement there. My laptop's position would be slightly off, its browser history wiped clean. I blamed it on my own exhaustion, on overworking myself. But then, money started vanishing from my account. When I confronted her, Jessica would break down. "I just needed essentials," she'd cry. "I was going to pay you back. I can't live like this, Rachel. I'm trying, but it's so hard." I'd relent, feeling guilty for making her grovel. After all, she'd lost everything. But then came that Tuesday evening in March. That credit card statement, and the realization that Jessica hadn't just lost her old life. She'd started building a new one at my expense. Looking back, the warning signs were everywhere. The secretive phone calls, the evasive answers about her job search, the lies I told myself to avoid seeing the truth. I didn't want to admit what I already knew. My sister had betrayed me, and this was just the beginning. The night I found that credit card statement, sleep was out of the question. I sat at my kitchen table until dawn, surrounded by a sea of papers, bank statements, bills, anything I could get my hands on. What I uncovered made me physically ill. It wasn't just one credit card. There were multiple. Personal loans, car loans, even a second mortgage on my house. All of it taken out in my name over the past 4 months. The debt totaled nearly $300,000. Money I hadn't even known existed, now tied to me. When I pulled up my credit report online, my stomach dropped further. My perfect credit score, built through years of careful budgeting and sacrifices, was in shambles. Late payments, delinquent accounts, and massive debts loomed over me like a dark cloud. For the first time in 3 years, I called in sick to work. Jessica came downstairs that morning, humming cheerfully as if it were any other day. She was wearing a brand new outfit, designer, of course, and carrying the mug I'd bought as a souvenir on my first vacation as a nurse. "Morning, Ratch," she chirped, pouring herself coffee. "I was thinking we could do dinner out tonight. There's this new place downtown that everyone's raving about." I stared at her, really seeing her for the first time. The expensive bag that had appeared last month, the new phone, the professionally styled hair. I'd assumed our parents had softened and started funding her again. I'd been so wrong. "Sit down, Jessica," I said, my voice cold and steady. Her smile wavered, but she sat, still clutching the mug as if it were a shield. "Want to explain this?" I spread the credit card statement on the table. The transformation was instant. The bright, sisterly mask fell away, revealing something sharp and calculated beneath. "You weren't supposed to find out yet," she said calmly. Not a denial, not an excuse, just a quiet acknowledgement that she'd been caught ahead of schedule. Yet, my voice rose, shaky but laced with anger. "When was I supposed to find out, Jessica?" "When they repossessed my car, foreclosed on my house, when I was hauled into court for fraud. When exactly were you planning to tell me you've been stealing from me and ruining my life?" She set the mug down carefully. "Don't be so dramatic, Rachel. I have a plan. I've always had a plan." "A plan?" My disbelief spilled out in a bitter laugh. "You've committed fraud in my name. I could lose my house, my job, everything. My nursing license, Jessica. Do you even understand that?" "Oh, please," he said, rolling her eyes, her tone dripping with condescension. "You're so small-minded, Rachel. Always have been. Content with your little nurse's salary, your tiny house, your boring life. I did you a favor." "A favor?" My voice cracked under the weight of her audacity. "Yes, a favor," she repeated, leaning forward with a gleam of greed in her eyes. "I've got investments lined up. Big ones. Once they pay off, I'll pay everything back. We'll split the profits. You'll make more money than you ever could changing bedpans. You should be thanking me." I laughed then, an empty, hollow sound that didn't feel like my own. "Thanking you? For stealing my identity? For throwing me into $300,000 of debt? Are you insane?" "It's not theft when it's family," she said simply, as if explaining a basic rule of life. "Besides, you owe me." "I owe you?" I repeated, anger now bubbling to the surface. "Jessica, I took you in when no one else would. I gave you a home. I fed you. I supported you for months. How could I possibly owe you anything?" She slammed her hands on the table, her voice rising in frustration. "Because you've always had the better life," she shouted. "You were the good daughter. The responsible one. Do you know how hard it was growing up with you as a sister? Perfect Rachel, who never needed help, who worked her way through school, who made me look like the screw-up." Her words stunned me into silence. For years, I'd invite her, the money, the freedom, the golden child status. And all that time, she'd invite me. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I'm calling the police," I said, reaching for my phone. "No, you're not," she replied, her voice suddenly calm and sharp again. She pulled out her own phone and slid it across the table. On a screen were photos, screenshots of emails, bank transfers, online shopping receipts. All of them bore my name and information. "If you go to the police, I'll make sure they think you were in on it from the beginning," she said, her tone icy. "Every transaction, every account, everything looks like you authorized it. And unlike you, I can afford good lawyers." I felt the blood drain from my face. She planned this from the start. Moving in, playing the helpless sister, pretending to change. It was all part of her scheme. She stood, smoothing her designer clothes as if we just finished a polite conversation. "I'll pack my things," she said lightly. "But remember, Rachel, if you try to take me down, I'll make sure you go down with me. You'll lose your job, your house, your career. Who do you think they'll believe? The socialite who was just trying to help her family, or the nurse suddenly drowning in debt?" I sat frozen as she walked upstairs, my mind racing. She was right. She'd set me up perfectly. If I went to the police, I could lose everything. But as I stared at the scattered papers, rage and determination began to replace my fear. Jessica had made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated me. Because while she was busy destroying my life, I'd been paying attention, and I had evidence of my own. What Jessica didn't realize was that I hadn't been as naive as she thought. From the moment I noticed money missing from my account, I had my suspicions. Jessica always had a way of making trouble seem like someone else's fault. But this time, I wasn't about to let it slide. Quietly, I installed security cameras throughout my home, small, discreet ones she'd never notice. And while she was busy pretending to play the role of a reformed sister, I was documenting everything, her rifling through my mail, using my laptop, and even making phone calls where she mimicked my voice to impersonate me. But cameras weren't the only card up my sleeve. Jessica had no idea about the network I built over my years as an ER nurse. When you spend your days saving lives, you tend to make lasting impressions. Police officers, lawyers, even federal agents, I'd helped them or their loved ones in some of their darkest moments, and many had promised to return the favor if I ever needed it. I never thought I'd actually have to call them in, least of all for something like this. But here I was. The moment Jessica walked out of my house with that smug smile, thinking she'd won, I made my first call. "Agent Martinez, it's Rachel Chin. Remember how I helped your daughter after her car accident last year? I need your help now." Within hours, my quiet suburban home turned into an FBI investigation site. Martinez and his team didn't waste any time. They pored over the credit card statements, fraudulent loans, and piles of evidence I had collected. The footage from the cameras was damning, but what they uncovered went far beyond my situation. "She's been doing this for years," Martinez told me as he analyzed her patterns on his laptop. 3 confirmed victims so far, all within the last 2 years. Each one trusted her, and she exploited that trust, leaving them financially ruined. "She's good, uses aliases, fake addresses, even fake identities for herself. But with you," he leaned back in his chair, giving me a grim smile. "She slipped. She got lazy and used her real name. That's all we needed." As the investigation unfolded, I discovered just how deeply Jessica's schemes ran. She hadn't just stolen my identity. She'd stolen identities from others, ruined careers, and destroyed families. Her husband Richard hadn't left her, as she claimed. She drained his company accounts dry before disappearing. She had a pattern, a method, and a long trail of victims who had been too scared or ashamed to come forward. Until now. The arrest came 2 weeks later. Jessica had checked into a luxury hotel in Miami under another stolen identity, flaunting her ill-gotten wealth like nothing could touch her. But when the FBI showed up, she was caught completely off guard. The hotel's security cameras captured everything: the handcuffs, the stunned look on her face, the way her confidence shattered when she realized the game was up. Our parents were less than thrilled when they heard about the arrest. My mother called me, crying, begging me to reconsider pressing charges. "She's your sister, Rachel. Families don't do this to each other." "No," I replied coldly. "Families also don't steal hundreds of thousands of dollars and ruin lives." My father, ever pragmatic, took a harsher approach. "If you don't drop the charges, you're dead to us." I laughed bitterly. "You know, Dad, you've been saying that my whole life. But here's the thing. I'd rather be dead to you than live as the fool you take me for." And with that, I blocked their numbers. Jessica's trial dragged on for nearly a year. True to form, she tried every trick in the book, crying in court, claiming she had a mental illness, even blaming me for driving her to crime by refusing to share my privileged life. None of it worked. The evidence was overwhelming, from the security footage to the financial trail to the testimonies of her previous victims who came forward once they heard she'd been caught. In the end, the judge handed down a 15-year federal prison sentence. She called Jessica's actions a betrayal of trust so egregious that it defies any excuse or justification. I wasn't there for the sentencing, but I heard she cried when the verdict was read. It didn't matter to me anymore. My closure didn't come from seeing her punished, it came from taking back my life. Richard, her ex-husband, reached out after the trial. He looked worn, a shadow of the man I remembered from their wedding. "I'm sorry, Rachel," he said. "I should have warned you. I didn't want to believe she could do it again. I thought maybe she'd change." "I did too," I said quietly, and that was the last time we spoke. Rebuilding my life wasn't easy. The FBI helped clear my credit, but I still had to rebuild my trust. In myself, in others, in the idea that not everyone was out to hurt me. Therapy helped. Moving helped. Starting over at a new hospital helped. Slowly, I learned to let go of the anger and shame. Jessica wrote me a letter once from prison, full of manipulative pleas for forgiveness and promises to change. I didn't even open it. I burned it and let the ashes scatter, just like the life I'd left behind. Sometimes I think about what happened, about everything I lost and everything I've gained since. And every time, I come back to the same realization. Betrayal doesn't have to define you. It doesn't have to break you. You can choose to let it make you better. I did. And I'll never look back.